before Jason tasted the riches that would later destroy him. He was a simple boy from a small town called Maplewood. Life was modest, but not without its struggles. His father worked long hours in a steel factory, and his mother sewed clothes for extra income. The family barely scraped by, but they were close-knit and happy in their small, two-bedroom home. Jason was a dreamer from a young age. While other kids played outside, he would sit by the window with a notebook, sketching out inventions or writing ideas for businesses. "One day, I'll make enough money so you'll never have to work again," he told his parents, his eyes sparkling with determination. But life wasn't kind to dreamers. Jason was only 14 when his father was injured at work. The accident left him unable to provide for the family, and they quickly fell into debt. Jason took on odd jobs, mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, and stocking shelves at the local grocery store, to help make ends meet. One evening, after a long shift, Jason found his mother crying at the kitchen table. She was clutching an eviction notice. "We'll figure this out," he said, his voice trembling but firm. It was in that moment Jason vowed he would never be poor again. Poverty, he decided, was a curse he would break. Jason's drive carried him through high school, where he excelled in business studies. He earned a scholarship to a state university, working part-time jobs to support himself. It wasn't easy, but Jason thrived under pressure. At 22, Jason started his first business, a small landscaping company he ran out of his dorm room. What began as mowing lawns quickly expanded into a full-fledged enterprise. By the time he graduated, he had hired a team and was making 6 figures annually. Jason's hunger for success only grew. He invested in real estate, dabbled in stocks, and started a tech company that took off within 2 years. By 30, he was a millionaire. He married Lauren, his college sweetheart, and they welcomed their son, Ethan, into a life of luxury. Jason bought a mansion, drove the finest cars, and vacationed in exotic locations. He had everything he had ever dreamed of, but he didn't know how to stop. Lauren began to notice Jason's relentless ambition was turning into greed. He spent more time at work than at home, chasing deals and partnerships that seemed riskier by the day. "Why can't you just enjoy what we have?" she asked him one night. "Because it's never enough," Jason replied. "You don't get it. If we stop now, we'll lose everything." Lauren's protests fell on deaf ears. Jason was consumed by the fear of returning to the poverty of his childhood, even though they were far from it. Jason's desperation to stay on top led him to make a fateful decision. He accepted a business proposal from a shady investor promising massive returns. Against Lauren's advice, Jason funneled all their savings into the deal, convinced it was a guaranteed win. The deal collapsed within months, leaving Jason's company in shambles. Lawsuits from clients followed, and Jason's reputation was destroyed. In his efforts to cover up his mistakes, he drained their personal accounts, including Ethan's college fund. It wasn't long before the cars were repossessed, the mansion was sold, and Lauren packed her bags. "I can't do this anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face as she held Ethan's hand. "You've lost yourself, Jason, and I can't let you take us down with you." As the door closed behind them, Jason realized he wasn't just losing his wealth. He was losing everything that truly mattered. Jason grew up in the kind of neighborhood where dreams felt like a luxury. Maplewood was a quiet, working-class town with cracked sidewalks, aging houses, and a lingering sense of despair. But for Jason, it was home. He was the second of 3 children, sandwiched between an older sister, Grace, and a younger brother, Toby. His parents, Robert and Helen, were hardworking but constantly battling the weight of bills and debt. Jason admired his father, who often came home from his 12-hour shifts at the steel factory with grease-streaked hands and an exhausted smile. "We're going to be all right, son," his father would say, even when the electricity was cut off or the fridge was nearly empty. Helen, his mother, was the backbone of the family. She turned scraps of fabric into clothes, stretched meals to feed 5 mouths, and always found a way to smile through the hardships. One evening, Jason watched her sewing late into the night by candlelight, her fingers moving swiftly over a piece of cloth. "Why don't you rest, Mom?" he asked. She paused, looking at him with tired eyes. "Because we don't quit, Jason. No matter how hard it gets, we keep going." That moment stayed with him. Helen's resilience became the foundation of Jason's drive. Even as a child, Jason showed a knack for finding opportunities. At 10 years old, he started a lemonade stand with a twist, He offered build-your-own lemonade, where customers could add flavors like mint or berries. It became so popular that he earned enough money to buy a second-hand bike, something his parents couldn't afford. By high school, Jason's entrepreneurial spirit had blossomed. He ran a tutoring service for his classmates, charging a modest fee to help them with math and science. During summers, he worked on a local farm, waking up before dawn to pick strawberries. His father would often say, "You've got something special, Jason. You're going to do great things. Just don't forget where you came from." Jason's ambitions were tested when he was 14. His father's accident at the steel factory was a turning point for the entire family. A piece of heavy machinery malfunctioned, crushing Robert's leg and leaving him unable to work. The compensation they received barely covered the medical bills, and soon the family was drowning in debt. Jason took on more responsibilities, helping his mother sew clothes and running errands for neighbors to earn a few extra dollars. But it wasn't enough. They lost their home and had to move into a small, run-down apartment. One night, Jason overheard his parents arguing in the kitchen. His mother's voice was strained as she said, "How much longer can we live like this?" His father replied, "We just have to believe, Helen. Things will get better." Jason clenched his fists in his room, vowing to himself that one day he would change their lives. Despite the chaos at home, Jason excelled in school. He was determined to use his education as a way out of poverty. His teachers often praised him for his determination, but it was his high school principal, Mr. Wallace, who saw his true potential. "You're not like the other kids, Jason," Mr. Wallace said one afternoon after calling him into his office. "You've got grit. There's a scholarship program for students like you. I think you should apply." Jason worked tirelessly on his application, pouring his heart into the essay about his family's struggles and his dreams of building a better life. When the acceptance letter arrived in the mail, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. At 18, Jason left Maplewood with a single suitcase and a heart full of hope. He hugged his parents tightly before boarding the bus to the state university. His father slipped him an envelope with $50 and a handwritten note. "Never forget where you came from. We're proud of you." Jason promised himself he would honor those words. He worked multiple jobs while attending classes, often staying up late to study after long shifts at the campus library. He lived on instant noodles and barely slept, but he didn't mind. He was building something, and every sacrifice felt worth it. It was during his sophomore year that Jason started his landscaping business. What began as a side hustle to pay for textbooks quickly grew into something bigger. By the time he graduated, he had contracts with several local businesses and enough savings to expand. Jason's parents beamed with pride when he returned to Maplewood for the holidays, driving a used but shiny car and carrying gifts for the whole family. His father, now confined to a wheelchair, looked at him with tears in his eyes. "You did it, son," he said. Jason smiled, but inside he felt the weight of his promise. He hadn't made it yet, not the way he wanted. He wanted more, not just for himself, but to ensure his parents never struggled again. Jason's rise to success was meteoric. By the time he turned 30, he had become a household name in the business world. His landscaping company expanded into multiple states, earning millions annually. With his sharp instincts and relentless work ethic, Jason diversified into real estate and tech startups, turning every venture into a gold mine. But success, for Jason, wasn't just about money. It was about proving he was unstoppable. That hunger, born from his childhood struggles, began to twist into something darker: the need to impress. Jason started spending lavishly, often to prove a point to others. He bought a sprawling mansion in an exclusive neighborhood, complete with a private pool, a home theater, and a garage filled with luxury cars. His parties became the talk of the town, extravagant affairs with expensive wine, live bands, and a guest list that included influencers, celebrities, and business moguls. Lauren, his wife, often tried to temper his spending. "Jason, do we really need all this? You're already successful. Why not focus on building a secure future for Ethan?" Jason would laugh and wave her concerns away. "This isn't just about us, Lauren. It's about showing the world what's possible. Besides, what's the point of making money if you can't enjoy it?" But deep down, Jason wasn't enjoying it. He was chasing something he couldn't define, a validation that no amount of wealth seemed to provide. As his businesses grew, Jason's schedule became grueling. He was often away from home, attending meetings, closing deals, and networking at events. Lauren noticed the changes first. How his once kind eyes became harder, how his laughter sounded hollow. One night, after Ethan's school recital, Lauren confronted him. "You missed it, Jason. Again. Ethan was looking for you in the crowd." Jason sighed, loosening his tie. "I'm doing this for him, Lauren. Do you think I enjoy missing these moments? I'm building a legacy for our family." But Lauren wasn't convinced. Jason's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages, and she couldn't shake the feeling that his priorities were shifting. Jason's downfall began when he started cutting corners in his business deals. Early on, his success was built on hard work and integrity, but now, the stakes were higher, and the pressure to maintain his empire was immense. He began signing contracts without reading the fine print, trusting shady partners who promised quick returns. He manipulated numbers to make his businesses appear more profitable to investors, ignoring Lauren's warnings that these shortcuts could backfire. When one of his real estate projects hit delays, Jason authorized the use of substandard materials to cut costs. "No one will notice," he told his project manager. "Just get it done." The cracks, literal and figurative, started to show. Jason's ambition blinded him to the consequences of his actions. Longtime employees who had been loyal to him were fired without warning when profits dipped. Small businesses that partnered with his company were left unpaid when deals fell through. One such victim was Mr. Henderson, an elderly contractor who had trusted Jason with his life savings for a real estate project. When the project collapsed, Henderson lost everything. "I'm sorry, but it's just business," Jason said coldly during their final meeting. "Business?" Henderson's voice cracked. "You promised me this would be safe. I believed in you." Jason avoided his gaze, but the old man's words haunted him. Despite his growing wealth, Jason began to feel restless. The thrill of success no longer satisfied him, so he turned to riskier ventures. A business associate introduced him to high-stakes investments, and Jason became obsessed with doubling his fortune overnight. He poured millions into speculative stocks and untested startups, ignoring Lauren's pleas to slow down. "You're going to lose everything," she warned. Jason scoffed. "I know what I'm doing. This is how the big players operate. You wouldn't understand." But Jason didn't understand either. His arrogance blinded him to the reality that these gambles were no better than throwing dice. Jason's obsession with success began to strain his marriage. Lauren grew tired of being sidelined, and Ethan hardly recognized the man his father had become. One night, Jason returned home late from a business trip, reeking of alcohol and flashing a smug grin. "We closed the deal," he announced, stumbling into the living room. Lauren didn't respond. She was sitting on the couch with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong now?" Jason asked, irritated. Lauren held up a bank statement. "You emptied Ethan's college fund? How could you?" Jason froze. He had used the money to cover a failed investment, thinking he could replace it before Lauren noticed. "I was going to put it back," he mumbled. "That's not the point," Lauren shouted, her voice shaking. "You lied to me. To us. I don't even know who you are anymore." The final blow came when Jason's largest investment collapsed. A fraudulent partner disappeared with millions, leaving Jason's companies in shambles. Lawsuits piled up, creditors called daily, and his name was splashed across headlines as a cautionary tale of greed and mismanagement. Lauren couldn't take it anymore. "I've stood by you through everything, Jason, but this is too much. You've lost yourself, and I can't let you take Ethan down with you." She packed her bags and left that same night, taking their son with her. Jason didn't try to stop her. He couldn't. For the first time in years, Jason sat in the silence of his mansion, staring at the emptiness around him. His empire, his family, and his identity had crumbled, all because of the choices he had made. When Lauren left with Ethan, Jason told himself he would fix everything. He would rebuild his business, regain her trust, and bring his family back. But reality hit harder than he had expected. The lawsuits against him escalated, draining his remaining resources. His once loyal clients demanded refunds, and creditors threatened legal action. His mansion, cars, and assets were seized to pay off debts. Jason watched helplessly as everything he had worked for was stripped away. The media painted him as a villain, a greedy businessman who rose too fast and fell even faster. His face was plastered across news outlets, and whispers of his failures followed him everywhere he went. The day the bank foreclosed on his home was the final blow. Jason stood outside the mansion he had once called his kingdom, clutching a single suitcase. Everything else was gone. He had no place to go. His former friends, who had once attended his lavish parties, ignored his calls. Even distant relatives, who had once admired his success, avoided him now that he was a public disgrace. Jason wandered the streets of the city he had once ruled, his tailored suits replaced by worn-out clothes and a heavy heart. He found himself sleeping in shelters and begging for meals, a shadow of the man he used to be. Life on the streets was brutal. Jason quickly learned that the world didn't stop for broken men. The cold nights were unbearable, and hunger gnawed at him constantly. He avoided the areas where he might run into people who knew him, ashamed of what he had become. But no matter how far he went, he couldn't escape the memories of his mistakes. One evening, as he sat on a park bench, Jason overheard a couple talking nearby. "Isn't that Jason Walker? The millionaire?" the woman whispered. "Used to be," the man replied, laughing. "Now he's just another loser." Jason clenched his fists, tears stinging his eyes. The words hurt, but he couldn't deny their truth. Months later, Jason received a letter at the homeless shelter where he sometimes stayed. It was from Lauren. She wrote about how difficult it had been to leave him, and how much Ethan missed his father. But the letter wasn't an olive branch. It was a plea for him to take responsibility for his life. "You weren't always like this, Jason," she wrote. "You were once a man who cared about others, who worked hard and dreamed big. I don't know what happened to that man, but Ethan deserves a father he can look up to. Please find him again." The letter was like a dagger to Jason's heart. He had failed not just himself, but the two people who had believed in him the most. Grace's intervention. Jason's sister, Grace, was the only family member who hadn't completely abandoned him. She was furious when she learned about his downfall, but couldn't bear to see him suffer. One day, she tracked him down at the shelter. "Jason, what are you doing to yourself?" she demanded, her voice thick with emotion. Jason avoided her gaze. "I deserve this, Grace. I ruined everything." "You don't deserve to live like this," she said firmly. "But you have to want to change. Sitting here feeling sorry for yourself won't fix anything." Her words stirred something in Jason. For the first time, he realized he didn't want to stay at rock bottom. Ethan's words. A few weeks later, Grace convinced Lauren to let Jason see Ethan. When Jason arrived at her small apartment, he was nervous and ashamed. His son, now 8, looked at him with a mix of confusion and sadness. "Daddy, why don't you live with us anymore?" Ethan asked, his voice small. Jason knelt down, tears streaming down his face. "Because I made some bad choices, buddy. I hurt Mommy and a lot of people. But I'm going to make it right. I promise." Ethan hugged him tightly, and in that moment, Jason knew he had to fight to become a better man. Not just for himself, but for his son. Lauren wasn't ready to forgive Jason, but she couldn't deny that he seemed different. He was quieter, humbler, and more willing to listen. "I'm not doing this for me," Jason told her during one of their rare conversations. "I'm doing it for Ethan. He deserves a father who doesn't give up." Lauren's heart softened, but she remained cautious. "Words are easy, Jason. Show me through your actions." Jason left Lauren's apartment that day with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that redemption wouldn't come easily. It would take time, effort, and humility. But he was ready to face the challenges ahead. The first step was to secure stable work. He couldn't keep relying on shelters and handouts. Grace helped him update his resume, but Jason felt the weight of his tarnished reputation. Employers wouldn't want to hire a disgraced businessman. Despite his fears, Jason applied to dozens of jobs. For weeks, he heard nothing but rejections. Finally, a small construction company offered him a position as a laborer. It was hard, physical work, digging trenches, carrying heavy materials, and working long hours under the sun. Jason didn't complain. Every bead of sweat felt like a step closer to regaining his dignity. Jason knew that true redemption required more than just hard work. He had to confront the people he had wronged. One of his first visits was to Mr. Henderson, the elderly contractor who had lost his life savings because of Jason's failed investment. Jason found him living in a small apartment, far from the comfortable life he had once enjoyed. When Mr. Henderson opened the door and saw Jason standing there, his expression hardened. "What do you want?" he asked coldly. Jason swallowed his pride. "I came to apologize," he said. "I know I can't undo what I did to you, but I want to make it right. I'm working now and I'll pay you back little by little. Mr. Henderson stared at him for a long moment before nodding. You've got a long way to go, son. But at least you're starting. Jason left feeling a mix of relief and guilt. He had taken the first step, but there were many more people to face. Jason's interactions with Lauren remained cautious. She agreed to let him visit Ethan on weekends, but she kept her guard up. To show her he was serious about changing, Jason began attending therapy sessions. He wanted to understand why he had made the choices that led to his downfall and how he could avoid repeating those mistakes. In therapy, Jason confronted painful truths about himself. His fear of poverty, his obsession with success, and his inability to ask for help had all contributed to his downfall. Lauren noticed the changes. He was more present with Ethan, more open about his feelings, and more willing to admit when he was wrong. You're different, she said one day after watching him help Ethan with his homework. I'm trying to be, Jason replied. For him. And for you. Months passed, and Jason's hard work at the construction site didn't go unnoticed. His supervisor, Mike, saw his dedication and offered him a promotion to team leader. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Mike said. I know you've had a rough past, but you're proving yourself now. The promotion came with a small pay raise, which Jason used to rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, but it was his. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of stability. Jason began volunteering at the homeless shelter where he had once stayed. He shared his story with others who were struggling, hoping to inspire them to keep fighting. Don't let your mistakes define you, he told a group of shelter residents one evening. You're more than the worst thing you've ever done. If I can start over, so can you. The experience was humbling. Jason realized that helping others was more fulfilling than any amount of money he had ever made. Jason's efforts didn't go unnoticed by his family. Grace continued to support him, and Lauren began to trust him again. She saw how much he had changed, not just in words but in actions. One day, she invited him to dinner with Ethan. It was the first time they had sat at the same table as a family in years. Ethan looked at his father with admiration. Are you going to stay for good this time, Daddy? Jason's throat tightened. I'm not going anywhere, buddy. I promise. Lauren's eyes softened, and for the first time, Jason saw a glimmer of hope that their relationship might one day be repaired. Jason's journey toward redemption reached a turning point when he was invited to speak at a charity event for underprivileged families. Standing on the stage, Jason shared his story, the rise, the fall, and the slow climb back. He spoke about the importance of integrity, humility, and the power of second chances. Success isn't about how much money you have, he said. It's about the people you help along the way. I lost sight of that, but I'm grateful for the chance to make things right. The audience gave him a standing ovation, and Jason felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. Jason knew that earning Lauren's forgiveness wouldn't happen overnight. While she acknowledged the progress he had made, their history was filled with wounds that couldn't be ignored. One evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Lauren invited Jason to sit on the porch with her. The air was crisp, and the stars were scattered across the night sky. I can see you're trying, Lauren began, her voice soft but firm. You're showing up for Ethan, you're working hard, and you've taken responsibility for your mistakes. But trust is harder to rebuild. Jason nodded. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me just because I've changed. But I want you to know that I'm not the same man who let you down. I was so blinded by my fear of failure that I lost sight of what really mattered. Our family. Lauren's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Do you even understand how much you hurt us, Jason? Watching you prioritize money over Ethan, over us, it broke me. Jason leaned forward, his voice trembling. I know I failed you, Lauren. And if I could go back and undo it all, I would. But all I can do now is show you that I've learned from my mistakes. I'm not asking for a second chance to prove anything to myself. I'm asking because I love you, and I want to be the husband and father you deserve. Lauren didn't respond immediately, but over the next few weeks, she began to open up. They started spending more time together as a family. Picnics in the park, helping Ethan with his school projects, and even sharing dinners like they used to. The walls Lauren had built around her heart started to crack, but she remained cautious. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Jason looked at her and said, Lauren, I know it's going to take time, but I'll wait as long as you need. I just want to be here for you and Ethan. Lauren paused, her hands stilling over the sink. It's not just about time, Jason. It's about consistency. I need to see that this isn't a phase. Jason nodded. You will. Ethan played a big role in bringing his parents closer. The little boy was thrilled to have his dad around more often, and often asked Lauren if Jason could stay longer. Mommy, why don't we all live together like before? He asked one night as Lauren tucked him in. Lauren kissed his forehead, her heart aching. Sometimes things take time, sweetheart. But your daddy loves you very much, and so do I. The innocence of Ethan's question stayed with Lauren. She began to wonder if, after everything they had been through, Jason truly deserved another chance. Jason decided to show Lauren how much he had changed in a way that words couldn't express. He organized a small family outing to Maplewood, the town where they had both grown up and fallen in love. He took her and Ethan to the park where they had shared their first kiss, the cafe where they had spent hours dreaming about their future, and the church where they had exchanged their vows. As they stood in front of the church, Jason turned to Lauren. This is where it all began, he said. I know I've broken the promises I made to you here, but I want to make new ones. I promise to never take you or Ethan for granted again. I promise to always put our family first. And I promise to keep working to earn back your trust. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. You're really trying, aren't you? I am, Jason said, his voice steady. Because you're worth it. We're worth it. A few months later, Lauren invited Jason over for dinner, but this time, there was something different in her demeanor. After Ethan had gone to bed, she sat down with Jason in the living room. I've been thinking, she began, her tone cautious but hopeful. You've shown me that you're serious about changing. You've been consistent, patient, and honest. I'm willing to try again, not just for Ethan, but for us. Jason felt a lump rise in his throat. Are you sure? Lauren nodded. Yes, but this time we build together. No secrets, no shortcuts. If we're going to make this work, we have to do it as a team. Jason reached for her hand, tears streaming down his face. I'll never let you down again, Lauren. I promise. Jason moved back in gradually, taking things slow and ensuring that Lauren and Ethan felt comfortable. They attended family counseling sessions to address the pain of the past and create a stronger foundation for the future. Jason also continued his volunteer work, sharing his story at shelters and schools to inspire others to overcome their mistakes. His humility and authenticity resonated with people, earning him respect in ways that his wealth never had. One sunny afternoon, as they sat in the park watching Ethan play, Lauren leaned her head on Jason's shoulder. We've come a long way, haven't we? She said softly. Jason smiled, his heart full. We have, and I'm never taking this for granted again. Lauren looked at him, her eyes filled with love. Welcome home, Jason.